So ever since the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X released back in 2020, it's been pretty much impossible to find them, especially in stores. Walking in, looking at the shelves, it always says, hey, go online. We'll eventually have stock there at some point, but we know that sells out immediately. The Series S has been on store shelves, and actually it's a bit easier to find, but for enthusiasts who want like the Xbox Series X or just any PlayStation 5, it's pretty difficult, unless you're willing to spend like double the MSRP and go on eBay to find one. Well, there right now is at least a rumor going around as to why we're starting to see the Xbox Series X and the Series S in stock much more frequently than the PlayStation 5, something that's now being reflected in a lot of published sales charts. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. This was posted up by Pure Xbox, but it was transcribed from the Xbox Era podcast. The headline reads, Microsoft paid for chip priority to increase Xbox Series X and S stock. Now, this is currently a rumor because it appears to be information gathered in a Twitter DM, which I will admit, this is some high-level information to just be kind of sent in a direct message on Twitter, but crazier things have happened in the rumor mills that ended up being true. Anyway, this from the Xbox Era podcast saying around April last year, I got a DM saying Microsoft's going to have a lot of consoles available this fall, and they did in the end, didn't they? Microsoft paid for chip priority at the factories, which is why we saw so much more and are still seeing so much more Xbox stock now. To me, it's a smart investment. Now, if you're keeping up with some of the different sales charts, and I'll say the estimates that are being thrown around, the Xbox is actually selling more than the PlayStation 5, at least recently, in the last month or two. And it seems to come down to just the stock situation. That's something we've seen, Matt Piscatella mentioned on the MPDs. It's like, hey, whatever company has the most stock is probably going to top the sales charts when it comes to dollar sales or hardware. Even so, though, we have seen Sony do pretty well and try to navigate this entire situation around the current chip shortage. I mean, the PS5, with estimates currently sitting over at 19 million PlayStation 5 systems that have been sent out to stores and customers. And for the Xbox Series, it appears to be about 13.5 million. So it's not as far apart as we saw with the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And yeah, a lot of that has to do with the bottleneck when it comes to supply. I did see some people online mention that this feels underhanded by Microsoft. And to that I say, hey, welcome to the world of business. If you have a distinct advantage, you're going to do whatever you can to use it. And for Microsoft, it is indeed money. In fact, I mean, the headline says money was the reason. Yeah, that's typically what happens in these business deals. You don't see these different manufacturers of chips and components make this stuff out of the kindness of their heart. There's a lot of bidding that goes on in the background, and typically they'll go to the highest bidder because it supports them at the end of the day. It's all transaction and money based. Now, the thing with Microsoft is they do have a distinct advantage around this in that they do a lot more than just games, and they need more hardware than just Xbox Series. Sony, obviously, is more or less looking for PlayStation 5 systems, and that's what they're shopping around with those orders. I remember when the PS4, right, we were talking about it still kind of sticking around, and one reason for that was brought up by different analysts was, well, I mean, the PS4 being cheaper in terms of components and creating it would actually give Sony at least some leverage when it comes to discussing deals for some of these different chips. On the flip side with Microsoft, yes, they can outbid Sony technically because they have all of this money. We saw them seemingly about to drop almost $70 billion on Activision Blizzard. But to go beyond that, yeah, they can throw some money around at the hardware level in order to secure enough chips to at least get more series systems out there and really try to stock up the different storefronts in stores with the Series S and online with the Series X. They're still marked up on places like eBay, but they're going for less than the PS5, and I do believe a lot of that has to do with just the overall stock right now. But the other thing you have to remember with Microsoft is, yes, they are providing these Xbox Series systems at retail, but they have a whole other side of the business that they're trying to build out currently, and that has to do with streaming games, because we had heard that they were upgrading their Xbox One S blades. Yeah, they were using like old Xbox One hardware essentially for their xCloud streaming, which wasn't going to cut it when they moved up to things like Flight Simulator. With the Xbox Series hardware being installed at these different data centers, while we see 13.5 million being estimated, I mean, you're going to have to start tacking on many, many more millions of systems that would be going into these different data centers in order to provide streaming anytime someone wants to sign in with their PC or on their cell phone. And if you're a manufacturer who provides these different chips, people think of like the main GPU or the CPU that goes into these systems, but there's a lot of supporting parts. Not too long ago, Nintendo and Apple were fighting it out for NAND flash memory. Didn't have anything to do with the Tegra chip or anything else. It was the flash memory that they were battling it out over. And obviously, Apple's going to order a lot of iPhones, many, many more than Switch systems Nintendo was looking to order. Nintendo seemed to navigate and at least figure it out. Probably had to call in some favors, or maybe Apple just got bored and had their hundreds of millions of NAND flash chips that they needed and kind of moved on, left Nintendo with the 20 million NAND flash chips or whatever. Yes, small stock for Apple there, but looking at what's going on with the Xbox Series systems, I mean, it's just an advantage for Microsoft now. When you have that data centers and a lot of your business relies on that, there's more that these manufacturers could end up doing for Microsoft outside of the Xbox Series system and blades that have to be installed into. I mean, with the massive cloud infrastructure that Microsoft's building up, who's to say they don't come back to that same manufacturer and say, well, we need chips for all this other stuff we're doing with storage and these other parts of the data centers that we're building out. So there's a lot of incentive for these different manufacturers to go with Microsoft over Sony if the money is right. And based on this rumor on a Twitter DM, the money must have been right. I mean, we're also seeing it reflected in the sales reports. I wouldn't be shocked if the MPDs that are coming up here show that, yes, the PlayStation 5 is struggling when it comes to stock, whereas the Xbox Series is actually selling more units because Microsoft's able to secure these chips. But hey, business is business, and at this point, I feel like Sony is just kind of hanging out, doing their best with what they have until this chip shortage at least alleviates somewhat. I think that's going to happen in 2023 because when we hear that it's at least starting to lighten up a bit and these chips are becoming more plentiful and the supply chains, all that stuff is at least going back to normal, it's probably going to be like a 6-month wait after that to see the effects on the other end, much like it was about a 6-month wait initially. Remember, Nintendo was still able to get out a lot of Switch systems, and they mentioned, hey, if this keeps going on in like half a year, we're probably going to see some problems at retail and getting these systems out there. And now it's very difficult to find a Switch system, an OLED or one of the older models. So I'm thinking mid-2023, and that's if the chip shortage starts to resolve itself by the end of this year. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Is this underhanded by Microsoft, or the way I see it, is it just business? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.